Since the early days of biblical narratives, one particular figure has been underrated, even though her importance goes way beyond words. Zipporah, Moses' first wife. Have you ever stopped to think about the impact she had on the journey of one of history's greatest leaders? Zipporah wasn't just a side character. She played a crucial role in Moses' divine mission and personal growth. God, in his infinite wisdom, places people in our lives for a reason, and Zipporah is living proof of that. When Moses fled Egypt after killing an Egyptian, he found refuge in Midian. That's where his story took an unexpected turn. Imagine being in Moses' shoes, running from your homeland, filled with doubt and fear, only to be welcomed by a completely different people. And that's when Zipporah entered the picture. She didn't just become his wife, she became a symbol of acceptance and renewal. How many times in our own lives do we feel lost, only for a special person to show up and help us find our way? That's how God works, through others. Moses' time in Midian wasn't just a period of exile, it was also a time of learning and personal growth. Marrying Zipporah wasn't just about forming an emotional bond, it was a symbolic act of integration into the Midianite culture. Their union represented something bigger than family ties. It symbolized Moses' own transformation. Similarly, in our journeys, how often do we need to open ourselves up to new cultures, ideas, and perspectives? It's something that can deeply enrich us. At her core, Zipporah was a woman of courage and spiritual insight. She saw in Moses not just a man, but an instrument of God. Think about how powerful it is when someone believes in you before you even believe in yourself. That's the dynamic between Moses and Zipporah. Sometimes we're blessed with people who see something in us that we can't see yet. These people push us, challenge us, and help us grow. Another fascinating aspect is that Moses and Zipporah's marriage symbolizes balance. He was a Hebrew with a divine calling to free Israel, and she was a Midianite, bringing different cultural and spiritual perspectives. Have you ever thought about how enriching such unions can be? It's in this kind of diversity that we find new strengths and creative solutions to seemingly impossible challenges. One of the most striking moments in Zipporah's story happens when she steps in to save Moses during a dangerous situation. Picture the scene. An event that could have ended Moses' mission was turned around by his wife's quick and decisive action. It's a reminder that even in our darkest moments, God can use those around us to rescue us. How can we apply this? Maybe it's time to value the people beside us more, recognizing how they too are divine instruments in our lives. Zipporah also teaches us the importance of taking active roles in critical moments. Instead of waiting for others to step up, she acted with determination and courage. Isn't that how we're often called to act too? Think about how you can make a difference in the challenging situations in your life. Maybe it's helping a friend in crisis or making a tough decision you've been putting off. Zipporah's story, though often overlooked, is a powerful reminder that each of us has a role to play in God's plan. No matter how small it might seem, our contributions can be essential. Have you ever wondered what your role is? Maybe it's time to reflect on that and seek a deeper connection with the divine plan. And so, as we reflect on Zipporah's significance, we begin to understand the impact she had on Moses' life and, by extension, on biblical history as a whole. Her courage, faith, and ability to take initiative offer timeless lessons. But what happens when cultural and spiritual differences become challenges in marriage? Well, that's something we'll explore further. When it comes to pivotal moments, few examples in biblical history are as impactful as Zipporah's intervention to save Moses. The scene is dramatic and packed with spiritual significance. Moses faces an imminent threat, and it's his wife's quick and determined action that changes the course of events. Think about the weight of that moment. It's not just a display of courage, but also of deep understanding of God's commandments and covenants. This particular situation unfolds during Moses' journey back to Egypt, after he received the divine call at the burning bush. In the moment of danger, as described in Exodus 4:24-26, God confronts him for not having fulfilled the covenant of circumcision on his son. Right then and there, Zipporah steps up and takes matters into her own hands, performing the act herself and saving Moses. Here we see not only her understanding of the importance of rituals, but also her bravery in acting when others might hesitate. Now imagine the emotional and spiritual impact of a moment like that. It's a powerful lesson about how understanding God's covenants can be a decisive factor in our lives. How many times do we face situations where decisive action is necessary? Maybe you're hesitating to make an important decision or confront something God has placed in front of you. Zipporah's story reminds us that even under intense pressure, we can act with faith and determination. It's also fascinating to consider Zipporah's role as a protector. She doesn't just safeguard Moses physically, she protects him spiritually too, ensuring he remains aligned with God's commandments. There's something incredibly inspiring about her ability to balance courage and obedience. How can we apply that in our everyday lives? Maybe it's by diving deeper into Scripture and finding ways to live by divine principles, even when it takes courage to do so. A modern parallel can be seen in those who take on spiritual leadership roles within their families. Have you ever known someone who, in times of struggle, leads their family in prayer or seeks solutions rooted in faith? These people are like Zipporah, defenders who ensure those around them stay connected to God. Zipporah's courage also teaches us the value of truly understanding spiritual laws and principles. She knew that circumcision was a sign of the covenant between God and his people. Today, that could translate to understanding our own spiritual covenants, whether they're commitments to God, our family, or our community. What have you been doing to strengthen those covenants? Maybe it's time to take a moment to reflect and take action. Finally, Zipporah's story shows us that even the simplest actions can have profound impacts. By making a decision that seemed small at the time, she altered the course of events that would go on to affect an entire nation. In the same way, our everyday decisions, when aligned with God's purposes, can have ripple effects we can't even begin to imagine. But what can we learn from the cultural and spiritual legacy Zipporah left behind? That takes us to the next chapter of her story. Zipporah, with her Midianite heritage, brought a wealth of cultural and spiritual perspectives that deeply enriched Moses' journey. Picture this, a Hebrew man called to a divine mission of unparalleled magnitude, married to a woman from a different background with distinct traditions. That contrast, far from being a hurdle, turned into a unique opportunity for collaboration and growth. After all, how often do we learn the most from people who think and live differently than we do? God, in his wisdom, often brings opposites together to create harmony and teach us valuable lessons. The Midianites had their own religious traditions, some of which echoed the teachings God would later reveal to Moses. This cultural intersection is fascinating. It shows how spiritual values can transcend borders. For instance, the practice of sacrifices and the concept of a sovereign God weren't exclusive to the Hebrews. They were also present in some Midianite customs. Zipporah, with her deep understanding of these traditions, helped Moses navigate between two worlds in a way few others could. Think about the impact this had on Moses. Living with Zipporah and her family prepared him to lead a diverse people. By placing him in Midian, God was shaping his character and broadening his perspective. For us, this story is a reminder that embracing cultural and spiritual diversity makes us more complete. Maybe it's time to reflect. How can you learn from people with different backgrounds? Maybe it's a coworker, a friend, or even a book you've never thought of picking up. Another key aspect is how Zipporah brought spiritual balance to Moses. Life isn't just about big accomplishments or dramatic events. It's also about moments of reflection and connection. In Midian, Moses had the chance to slow down, learn, and grow spiritually. How many times does God call us to pause and look around? Zipporah was a catalyst in this process, helping Moses connect with something greater. What's more, Zipporah's ties to her family, especially her father Jethro, offered Moses a clear example of wise leadership. Jethro, a priest of Midian, not only welcomed Moses but also became a mentor to him. It's worth noting how Zipporah served as a bridge between these two men. This kind of interpersonal connection is crucial in our own lives. Who are the Jethros in your journey, and how can you be a Zipporah, facilitating connections for others? The spiritual dynamic between Moses and Zipporah also teaches us about the power of collaboration in relationships. Even though they came from different contexts, they found ways to bring their beliefs together to create a strong foundation. That's something we can apply in our own relationships. How can you work with your partner or friends to align your values and build something greater? Zipporah's cultural legacy reminds us that faith and tradition don't have to clash. They can coexist and even complement each other. In today's increasingly globalized world, this is more relevant than ever. How can we honor our roots while learning from others? That's a question each of us should consider. Ultimately, Zipporah's influence was a constant in Moses' life, even as he faced monumental challenges. She helped him remember that God works through all cultures and that his plan is bigger than we can imagine. But what about the moments when the differences between Moses and Zipporah became tough to navigate? That leads us to the next chapter of their journey. Moses and Zipporah faced challenges that went beyond cultural and spiritual differences. In any relationship, especially one between people from such distinct backgrounds, difficulties are bound to arise. And with Moses and Zipporah, it was no different. But instead of weakening their bond, those challenges became opportunities for growth. Have you ever thought about how adversity can strengthen a relationship when faced with faith and unity? God, who brought them together, also gave them the tools to overcome those hurdles. One clear example of these tensions was the difference between Moses' divine calling and Zipporah's everyday responsibilities. While Moses was driven by a divine mission that placed him at the center of extraordinary events, Zipporah often took on a quieter, more behind-the-scenes role. Imagine what it must have been like for her as a wife and mother, balancing family duties while supporting such a monumental mission. It's a reminder that in relationships, both sides have to make sacrifices and adjustments for the partnership to thrive. A particularly significant moment highlighting this dynamic occurs when Moses returns to Egypt to lead the Israelites. Initially, Zipporah and their sons go with him, but later she returns to her father Jethro's house. This temporary separation raises important questions about the sacrifices they both made. How many times do we face tough decisions in our own lives, where we have to balance family responsibilities with personal aspirations? That balance is a constant challenge, but it's also an opportunity for mutual growth. Zipporah and Moses also teach us about the importance of communication amidst differences. While the Bible doesn't give us detailed accounts of their conversations, it's safe to assume that open dialogue was crucial for navigating tough times. In our own relationships, open communication is key to resolving conflicts. How do you handle differences in your marriage or friendships? Maybe it's time to practice listening more and talking less, seeking to understand rather than just respond. Another interesting aspect of their relationship is how they complemented each other. Moses had a direct connection with God and a clear vision for his mission, while Zipporah brought a practical, resilient approach to daily challenges. Their partnership shows how differences can be a strength rather than a weakness. When each person in a relationship recognizes their unique strengths, the bond becomes richer and stronger. During moments of crisis, like the circumcision of their son, Zipporah demonstrated remarkable leadership and courage. Her actions didn't just save Moses, but also solidified her role as an essential partner in his mission. This reminds us that even in the toughest situations, God can use our efforts to fulfill his greater purpose. Think about your own relationships. How can you be an even greater support for those you love? Maybe it's time to take proactive and bold steps, just as Zipporah did. Faith also played a crucial role in their union. Despite their different spiritual backgrounds, they shared a common commitment to God, which guided their decisions. This is something we can apply in our own relationships. When there's a shared spiritual purpose, differences become secondary. What's the greater purpose guiding your relationship, and how can you use it to overcome daily challenges? Ultimately, Moses and Zipporah's marriage teaches us that mutual love and respect are key to overcoming adversity. Even when circumstances separated them, they remained committed to each other and their mission. That kind of perseverance is something we can all strive for in our relationships. When you're facing a tough moment, do you remember that God is working in your life and in your union? As we reflect on the challenges Moses and Zipporah faced, we're inspired by their strength and dedication. But what about Zipporah's lasting impact on her family and on biblical history as a whole? That's a question we'll dive into next. Zipporah's legacy, though often overshadowed by Moses' grand achievements, is profound and enduring. She wasn't just the wife of a great leader. She was a woman of courage and vision, whose influence shaped not only her family, but also biblical history as a whole. How often do we overlook the crucial roles played by those working behind the scenes? Through stories like Zipporah's, God shows us that every role, no matter how understated it might seem, is vital to his greater plan. One of the most striking aspects of Zipporah's legacy is her willingness to act decisively in critical moments. Her intervention in circumcising her son wasn't just an act of bravery. It was a deeply spiritual gesture that reflected her understanding of God's covenants. Just imagine the courage it took to step up in such an urgent situation. How often are we called to make quick, bold decisions that can impact our families or communities? Zipporah's story inspires us to stay alert and ready to act when the moment calls. Moreover, her impact is evident in the generations that followed. Her sons, Eleazar and Gershom, carried the legacy of their parents, including the values and teachings Zipporah instilled in them. This makes us think about the importance of passing down strong principles to the next generation. How are you influencing the people around you, especially your family? Maybe it's time to invest more in teaching values that will leave a lasting impact. Zipporah also teaches us the importance of balance and collaboration. In her relationship with Moses, she wasn't just a passive follower, she was an active partner. Her wisdom and strength complemented Moses' spiritual leadership, creating a dynamic that allowed them both to contribute to God's purposes. This makes us reflect on our own partnerships. How can we better support those who share our journey? Maybe it's by listening more, showing patience, or offering our own wisdom at the right moments. Her example also highlights the value of respecting and learning from different cultures. Zipporah's Midianite heritage wasn't a barrier, it was a bridge that connected Moses to new perspectives and traditions. In today's diverse world, this reminds us that there's so much to gain by learning from those who come from different backgrounds. How about opening yourself up to new ideas and experiences? It could transform not only your life, but also the lives of those around you. Another key takeaway from her legacy is the reminder that you don't need to be in the spotlight to make a difference. Zipporah didn't lead crowds or perform visible miracles, but her actions had a profound and lasting impact. Often, the most meaningful contributions come from those who work quietly, behind the scenes. Have you ever stopped to think about how your daily actions can create a ripple effect, even if they're not noticed by everyone? God calls us to be faithful in the small things, knowing they can lead to great outcomes. Zipporah also exemplifies unshakable faith. In a life filled with challenges and uncertainties, she stood firm in her convictions and let her faith guide her decisions. That's something we can all take to heart. When faced with difficulties, where do you turn for strength? Like Zipporah, we can find courage and direction through our connection with God. Ultimately, Zipporah's legacy challenges us to think about the impact we want to leave on the world. Her story reminds us that our actions, no matter how small they may seem, can have eternal consequences. What kind of legacy are you building? Maybe it's time to start thinking about how you can positively influence your family, your community, and even the world. As we reflect on her life and the impact she made, we can't help but wonder, what would Moses' journey have been like without Zipporah? Her courage, wisdom, and unwavering support shaped not only the man, but also the leader he became. Her story inspires us to be agents of change and to embrace the role God has given us, whether it's big or small. Now that you know the true story of Zipporah, ask yourself, what can we learn from the courage and faith of this extraordinary woman? Her actions, though often subtle, were absolutely essential in shaping one of the greatest chapters of the Bible. Are you ready to apply that lesson in your own life? Who knows, maybe today God is calling you to play a crucial role in someone else's journey. Think about it. How can you be a positive influence on your family, your friends, or even your community? Maybe it's time to take that leap of faith, act with determination, and embrace the role God has for you. And remember, no matter how small your contribution might seem, it could have an eternal impact. If you enjoyed this content, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss another video like this one. And of course, give it a like to support our work and help share this message with even more people. Now, take a moment to check out some other amazing videos that are popping up on your screen. See you in the next one.